Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Tarot, where we are on a voyage of discovery through the Major Arcana of the tarot cards. We are looking at each card in turn in a very detailed and deep way. Yes, you will be able to find shorter videos on the Major Arcana cards. No, you will struggle to find any as deep and comprehensive as these. So, as always, we will be looking at the number, the name, and the symbolism of our next card, the Wheel of Fortune, the 10th card. So find your cards, make yourself a cup of tea, and join us as we explore the Wheel of Fortune. Welcome back, guys. So today we are doing the 10th tarot card in the Major Arcana, which almost puts us halfway through the Major Arcana. So if we've got 22 Major Arcana cards and we're 10 in, we're just one card away from that halfway point, which means those of you that have been watching up to this point, you're halfway to your goal of being able to read the tarot, not just well, but pretty comprehensively. For those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. Subscribe below, and I use two different tarot cards to illustrate my videos. For those of you that are regular watchers, this will be the 10th time you've heard this, so relax, sit back, drink tea. For those of you that haven't and are new, let me just show you the tarot cards that I use. So I normally use two decks. I'm going to be referring to a third today like I did on my last episode, and I'll talk about that in a second. This is the first deck that I use. This specific deck is a restoration deck by Kris Hadar. It is called the Veritable Tarot de Marseille, and it is based on the Tarot de Marseille tradition of tarot, which is very French and very 17th century and 18th century. This specific card deck is based on the 1760s edition of the Nicholas Conver deck. So this is historical French tarot. Here we have a tarot deck called the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that was initially published in 1909, so much later. This was by artist Pamela Coleman Smith, commissioned by a man called Arthur Edward Waite, and it is based on some of the Hermetic teachings of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So there's quite a lot of Hermetic occultism and Kabbalistic occultism references in this tarot deck. This became pretty much the standard deck that everyone learned from in the Western world, up until probably this kind of tarot boom that's happening now, this huge resurgence of new tarot decks. The reason why I use both of these tarot decks, a 17th, 18th century deck and a 1909 deck, is because your tarot deck, whatever you have in front of you, will normally be based on one of these traditions. It'll either be based on the kind of historical French, which was originally printed as a gaming deck and later had occultism and divination meanings retroactively fitted, or it will be based on this occult deck of Arthur Edward Waite's. You may have a tarot deck that fits outside of these traditions somewhere here. That is because the artist and designer of your deck has decided to do something different and just remove themselves from this tradition. That is absolutely fine. All the points that I will mention today will still fit on your tarot deck. Just some of the finer details that I will point out on the cards and the symbols may not be present on your deck, but the meanings and the insinuations will still be there for the majority of times. The third tarot deck that I'm going to be using is this little glitzy gold number. This is the Visconti Sforza deck. That is a 1400s, 15th century tarot deck. It's actually a collection of tarot decks. There's about 12 decks, and of the surviving decks, only we don't know what about 3 of the major arcana look like because they've not survived. But it was a hand painted set of decks. commissioned by the Visconti family for kind of a very public family wedding. So it's quite a rich and opulent deck, as you can see, and probably cost a bomb to commission. But it is a very, very early tarot, somewhere before here, so 1450s, 1700s, 1909. So we've got about 500 years worth of tarot tradition here. I normally bring this on just to illustrate the origins of that tarot card and where some of the ideas have come from, and especially if there are minor differences like there are today. So I will briefly mention that tarot card deck as well. And don't worry, for those people that do watch this tarot deck, as we go through going towards card number 21, we are not going to have more and more tarot decks. I'm not going to have like 10 tarot decks by the end of it. It sometimes will feel like that, but it's pretty much these two, with this one occasionally. So that is everything. So welcome back to those people that do normally watch the show. So today I am looking at the 10th card, the Wheel of Fortune. I'm going to be doing the number first because there's not an awful lot of it, and then we're going to be talking about the symbolism and the name. So let's start with the number 10. The number 10, as you remember from the numerology lesson last time, we only really do numerology up from 1 to 9, and then everything else is a repeat. So we have, with 10, we have 1 plus 0, which is just a reiteration of the number 1, just on a higher plane. So we're actually talking about all the numerology principles that we talked about at the Magician. So for those of you that haven't seen the Magician video, it might be worth just kind of having a look at the numerology of it. But very briefly, we are looking at new beginnings, new starts, new possibilities. We are looking at an active number. We are looking at a moving forth number. And we are also talking about things that are about the self, the I, the ego. We are also, with the 10, we've got a reference to what I talked about in the 4th video, the Emperor. We've got the Tetractys. So if you remember, we had these dots like so. So when we talked about the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we talked about how the previous numbers added together into this triangular form. This is called the Tetractys. Oh, Tetractys. Which was a sacred symbol for Pythagorean number theory. It taught quite a lot of their foundational philosophies and experiences, talking about the monad, going into the dryad, going into the triad, and then the four, the real world, the solid world, the material world. And it all talks about the dimensions, the first dimension, the second dimension, third dimension, etc. But this totals, all the dots total 10. So the kind of the number of completion, or a perfect number in Pythagorean, can be seen as a 10. So the other thing that we are talking about with the number 10 is going back to the start. So we've gone through 1 to 9, and this is where it's very different from 1. We're not saying that 10 is exactly the same as 1 because it's gone through those stages 1 to 9. We're not right back at the start, but we are returning to the starting point. So that 10 can mean about a completion, or a completion of a cycle, or one revolution of the Wheel of Fortune. So when we're looking at 10, we're looking at returning back to our start point, completing something, and getting ready for the next phase, the next cycle in some way. The only other thing about the number is that it is made up of 1 and 0. 1 being the active, the directive force, the upright triangle, and 0 being kind of like chaos, like nothingness, the source of all things. Everything stems out of 0. 0 is this pre-existence kind of quagmire of primordial soup, if that makes sense. So everything else kind of evolves out of it. So it is about beginnings and things issuing forth out of that chaos again. So that chaos, that unpredictability is also referring to the idea of that Wheel of Fortune that we're going to be talking about later. The only other thing is obviously we have a decimal based system. The 1 and 0 makes it look like it's a binary, but when we're talking about 10, we're talking about a 10 base number system, which is obviously our decimal system. It's counting up to 10, 20, 30, 40, up to hundreds. We could, as humans, have pretty much any kind of counting system. So we have done here in the UK, we obviously had pounds, shillings and pence, and in weight we have pounds and ounces. So those are not 10 based systems. They work on kind of other factorials like 16s and 24s and kind of weird things like that. So we could ideally really use anything for the basis of a number. We could count in binary, for example, but we don't. And one of the reasons why we don't is could be linked to our human anatomy. We talked about this a little bit in the Pope with the number 5, and then 5 being very, very human, because we've got 5 fingers on a hand, but actually we've got 2 hands, so we've got 10. So if we're counting, it's quite natural to count on fingers. So it's quite possible that our decimal system stemmed out of something that's very, very human to us. We have used our bodies to base our numbering system, and there is some arguments about how much we based on our experience of being human. You know, like our directions, for example, are based on the fact that we are facing one direction. We have a past, back direction, we have a left and a right, and we have an up and a down. It wouldn't be the same if we weren't anatomically as we are. So there's quite a lot that is actually based on us and our experiences of being human, and that 10 decimal system is, I think, pretty much one of those things. So that's pretty much it I want to kind of cover for the number of 10, and referencing it back to earlier numbers for you guys. So let us look at the name. The Wheel of Fortune is referencing, let's start with this, referencing this symbol. In medieval times, in early modern times, this would have been a very, very common symbol. It's the Wheel of Fortune. This is the wheel. Fortune, either as seen as fate, or Fortuna, the goddess of fate. And here in the centre, you can see the goddess of fate, Fortuna. She is blindfolded because she doesn't give a proverbial darn about the fates of those people on the wheel. She is spinning the wheel and seeing where it ends up. There are some early references to how annoying this can be, and how Fortuna is both stupid and mean for kind of doing this, but you know, it's spinning the wheel of fate without worrying too much, without being preoccupied about where they're going to land. So this symbol became quite a common symbol in illuminated manuscripts at the time and other kind of works, to show how fate can change and fate can be different. They are normally situated with 4 people on the wheel, talking about where you can end up. It's normally a king at the top, a pauper, or someone suffering wrath of the fates on the bottom, someone climbing up to the top, and someone descending down on the right. This was to show that people climb up to good fortune and descend down to bad fortune. But it's also this kind of symbol of the people at the top should not be too prideful. It's a very kind of religious symbol in a way, by saying that don't have too much pride for where you are, because things can change. Pride was seen as a sin against God. Pride was seen as a sin against Jesus, because in some ways it pitted you up against those divine beings. It pitted you up against Jesus by saying that, you know, I'm doing so well. You were kind of pitting yourself up against Jesus. So pride was a bit of a negative sin in the medieval times, and so symbols like this reminded people that actually this is only one turn of fate, and things could change in a matter of minutes. Here you can kind of see the king with little donkey ears which is kind of that hint towards ignorance, being an ass, that kind of stupidity because they think that everything is fine and stable, and it's not. So this is where the idea of the Wheel of Fortune, Le Rove de Fortune, or Le Rove Fortuna, kind of comes from. It's this typical symbol of the fates being moved around by the goddess Fortuna. We can now segue quite quickly and easily onto the symbolism. So here we can see, unlike other cards, that Fortuna is symbolized on the wheel with her blindfold. You can see that it's Fortuna, or a deity, excuse me, because of these wings, and that she is in control of this wheel. You can also see the 4 beings on this wheel, and if you look carefully you can see these little scripts that come out. So these traditional, here we go, that was just a tail. Traditionally these would have little words on them. So this one would have Regnabo written on it, this one Regno, this one Regnavi, and Sumsina Regno. So that those are Latin like mottos, I suppose, for I will reign, I'm going up to the top. I do reign, I reign. I reign is probably more accurate, otherwise it would be ego regno. So I reign. Here, Regnavi, I have reigned, like coming down from the top. And here, some Sine Regno, I have no kingdom. I am without kingdom. Yeah, I am without kingdom is best translation of that. So this is this idea of changing fates, changing fortunes of the people on the wheel. So we can see that on these scripts quite clearly. These are obviously missing from later tarot cards, but the reason is because A, the majority couldn't read Latin, but B, you'd pretty much know the symbol and what the symbol meant. So there was no need to put those wordings on it. But here you can kind of see that they must have had that wording on. My version doesn't really have text on these. Here it does have this little kind of monkey tail for the person that's down climbing. And sometimes this figure on the bottom is seen as completely naked, like even without clothes, like literally has nothing. So here we're seeing kind of the turning of fates. We're seeing that completion of a wheel, a completion of a turning, but we're also seeing everything is up to fate, everything is up to the whims of fate, and fate is pretty whimsical because she's got a blindfold on and she doesn't really care where you kind of end up. So when this comes up in a reading, it can be kind of everything is up in the air, but it could also be that anything that does happen is kind of fated. So if we are in a relationship and we're asking what our next stages of this relationship is, it can kind of say, well, they're up to the fates. It can kind of hint at go with the flow, or it could be talking about this is fated to be as it is. Take the next step. Take the next step forwards. If it was in a work situation and a promotion was coming up, it would kind of symbolize that you probably will get that promotion you're climbing up. An inverse might say that there'd be delays or there'd be issues getting it. But normally upright, if you're going for a work promotion, it's kind of fated to happen. There is something there that is driving you to the top. So the whims of fate is kind of one thing that comes out of that. Let us go to the other 2 cards then. We now no longer have the blindfolded fortune, but we do still have the wheel in 2 different capacities, and we do still have figures on the wheel. We are missing 1 figure on the wheel now, and instead we just have the 3 figures. Let us talk first about this, and then we'll move on to here and we'll do a couple of hidden symbols in that card. But this tarot card has an awful lot. This tarot card echoes another tarot card which we haven't gone over yet. Here you can see that there's 4 beings that are the same around it, and this is from the visions of Ezekiel and makes reference to in Revelations. But it's an interesting thing that we're kind of at halfway point, and we're kind of almost having this little hint at a revelation of what's coming up later. I sometimes think that could be like when you read accounts of mystics and accounts of holy people, they kind of say that they have this flash of revelation, and then nothing for a while. They kind of go through a kind of a dark night of the soul afterwards, that they have this flash of spiritual experience and then they get nothing until much later on when things become a little bit more regular. And this kind of almost puts me in mind of this, that halfway through we get this flash, and it's a drawn sketch flash. You can see that these are very much illustrations of what's to come. And then later when we kind of hit the end point, we've got these more lifelike images. We get a full experience of what that is. So we kind of get a hint here at what's to come. What is fated to be. So it reminds me of that kind of that journey, that mystic journey, that seership journey, that journey of the prophet, where you may have a flash of realization or a flash of something great, which will go away again before it kind of comes back after a lot more work. So anyway, let's have a look at some of these symbols. So let us start with these four beings as we've talked about them. We have an angel here, we have an eagle here, we have a lion here, and we have a bull. They're all winged. This is a reference to the evangelists, quite simply. So the angel is sometimes representative of Matthew, the eagle of John, the lion of Mark, and I think the bull is therefore Luke. You can correct me if I've got that wrong. So these are the four Gospels, and you've kind of got the books kind of hinting at that Gospel reference as well. Remember that the Waite was a mystical Christian, so this makes sense for them. The other thing that these could be is anything of the four, really. So we see the four fixed signs of the zodiac, with Aquarius represented by the angel, Scorpio represented by the eagle, Leo more easily represented by the lion, and Taurus represented by the bull. So we've got the four fixed signs and the four seasons of the zodiac. We've also got the four elements, and therefore we represent the four suits of the minor arcana in this card. So we have Aquarius is air, we have Scorpio being water, Leo being fire, and Taurus being earth. So we've got the four elements and the four tarot suits, air being swords, water being cups. This is crazy on the brain. Leo fire being wands, and earth being pentacles. So we've got the four suits as well. So that kind of sums up these four. We can do the four cardinal points, we could do the four winds, the four anything really in these kind of formats. But that's the majority of what they're supposed to symbolise. The four evangelists with the Gospels, the four elements, and the four zodiac signs, the fixed zodiac signs. Here we have a wheel. On the wheel we've got three beings. This is kind of a reference to that earlier tradition that we saw in the Visconti Sforza, but here instead we have things that were kind of more important to the OTO, and we have this link to the Egyptian myth. It's hinting at Eliphas Levi's kind of work on the tarot, which, if that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. If you are someone that's been doing an awful lot of occult reading, then this is kind of coming from Eliphas Levi. So we've got the Sphinx as a king on the top, the person that's actually, they kind of reversed the order a little bit from this. You see that this one's going on the top, which makes sense because it's Anubis. Anubis is I will reign. And then here going down, we've got this serpent, which is Typhon in its serpent form. So we've got the kind of 3 Egyptian references there, which is kind of very outer portion of the Golden Dawn, not the inner lodge. So on this wheel, we have an awful lot of symbolism. They have put lots of letters and lots of kind of symbols on it. So we have T-A-R-O at the 4 cardinal points. Tarot. Yeah, so this was kind of like a cool, trendy way in Western occultism to refer to tarot as its original early spelling. And that's because rearranging these 4 letters, you can kind of get a slightly arcane, slightly out of modern usage Latin phrase. The Latin phrase that they have, let me just find it, rota taro orat tora ator. One translation, because it is very odd Latin. It's kind of occult, symbolic Latin that they've kind of hashed together. One kind of interpretation of that is rota being the wheel, tarot, the wheel of the tarot, orat, teaches or speaks, Torah, the law, like from the Torah, the Jewish book, the law of Artor, A-T-O-R, Artor, Hadar, the Egyptian deity. So that's one translation of that. You could also have, as I've seen someone say, the wheel of the tarot teaches that love is the law, in a very interesting, creepy kind of way. So that's where this comes from. It's a kind of a reference to tarot, and they preferred this spelling because it kind of hinted at this deeper meaning where you could kind of rearrange the letters into different words this way. 5 words. Unfortunately, it doesn't kind of create that wonderful Sator palindrome thing. If you're an occultist, you'll know what I mean. So the what are between it is the Yod He Vav He, which is the divine name of God in Hebrew. It's divine and mystical because it doesn't, like Old Hebrew doesn't have the vowels. The vowels are kind of seen as kind of like marks above and below, but biblical Torah-ic Hebrew doesn't have the vowels kind of done. So we don't really know how that was pronounced, and there is a few suggested ways of pronouncing it, but it's the unpronounceable name of God for that reason, and therefore it's sacred. So we've got God's name written there, and that's a link to the French occult tarot authors like Papus and Levy and that kind of tradition that linked those. Even Atella kind of talked about these kind of letters on the tarot. Inside that wheel we have this kind of 8 bar cross, 8 spokes cross, and we can see these symbols that are striked through. That can be a little bit tricky to see on the card, especially if you don't know what they are. So let me just show you. This top one here is that. An interesting way to draw that, but hey ho. Here on its side, if we turn it around this way, we have this. Here we have this, and here we have this. So these are the 3 alchemical elements. This is mercury, this is sulfur, this I'll refer to later, and this is salt. For those of you that haven't looked at alchemy, and you know this is an awful lot in this card, and this is the reason why it really does take studying the Order of the Golden Dawn to kind of know it. These are the kind of foundation elements. So you may be aware of the 4 elements: the fire, earth, water, air, of kind of Western Western occultism. These are a different sort that are used for alchemy. Mercury and sulfur are seen as opposites. So Mercury is slippery, often wet, cold. Sulfur is the opposite. It's dry, heating, explosive. And then salt is what kind of brings them together. It's neutral. So this is passive, this is active, and this is neutral. So this is the body. So this is like spirit, soul, and body of kind of anything alchemical, and they're different in terms of the three different worlds. Funnily enough, I'm doing this is already long gone by the time that I film this, but I am actually doing a live that will be talking about the alchemical elements on Instagram. The video should be upline if that's already been done. So here we go. This fourth is looks like it should be Aquarius. It's actually a reference to alchemical water, the kind of the principle that dissolves the ego of the person and dissolves the gross matter into the fine matter. That to me looks like something that was just kind of added to make balance. This is not something that is normally put alongside these three elements in that kind of way. Cool. So we have that. That is pretty much all of that card. What this is saying is that this is kind of like a completion. This is kind of like a wheel, and it's a very holy symbol. So we're linking it to the three elements of alchemy. We're linking it to the sacred word, and we're linking it to the whole tarot. It's like the key to the tarot. And some books kind of talk about this card and the world being kind of the keys to the whole of the tarot. It talks about the four suits of the tarot, and it talks about the division of the Major Arcana. That there's Hebrew associations, 22 letters, 22 cards, that there may be alchemical elements to it. There may be references to the Egyptian, and this kind of like Waite does poo-poo this, but originally, very early on, there was some occultists that thought that the tarot stemmed from an ancient Egyptian belief, and Waite was like, no, it doesn't. Quite rightly so. But he's kind of left them on here referencing Eliphas Livy and his belief that it came from Egypt. So we see similarly here pretty much those symbols, but just in a stripped down version. So we have the wheel. We have 6 bars on the wheel. Interesting reference to the 6 in the tarot. 6 of the tarot is the Lovers, so it's about choice and decisions and spinning the wheel based on it. We have these 3 figures with missing once again the one in the bottom, and we have this alternative motion. Things are going anti-clockwise in this wheel. Things are climbing to the top and going down to the bottom. We have them as animals. Almost kind of referencing that we don't have our conscious or rational or free will to kind of break out this cycle. We are kind of predestined. So it's kind of like almost like a little hint of that. We've got the king here. We've got someone kind of going down to the bottom and someone going at the top. The thing that I do like about the Tarot de Marseille is it does have this handle here, and it doesn't have someone standing at the side. We could easily have Fortuna standing at the side. But this means that when you're laying out the cards, it can be quite interesting to see which card here has got control of that wheel. What is turning that wheel of fate? So I do quite like the fact that it's got this handle. Let us take a look at the hidden symbols on this card. There's nothing specifically, I'm just trying to get my graphics tablet working. There's nothing specifically, but there's still a couple of interesting things. So here we can see this triangle between the 3 monkeys, the three animals or whatever. Three animals of some sort, however you want to interpret them, and they are pretty much open for discussion. Like this, that makes a triangle. We have also got the circle here, which is a very obvious one. Sorry if I'm a bit shaky on this. And then we've also got a square here. Ooh, Like so. So we have spirit at the top, descending in chaos, the circle, the sum total of everything, nothing and everything at the same time. And then we've got matter here. So it's almost like spirit descending into a form of chaos, ruling over the material world, which is kind of the image of the wheel. We've got the gods, spirit, causing chaos for the material world underneath, and it may seem like chaos, but it's kind of almost their form of destiny. Remember that Fortuna is blind in those early images. We also have a lot of numbers here. So we have, if we look at the 1, we've obviously got one wheel. If we look at the 2, we've got these 2 pillars, and actually, interestingly, it kind of disappears here. You can see that it's just not seeming to line up there. There's an imaginary pillar going beyond. We've got a 2 there. So we've got the 1, the 2, the 3, which is what we did earlier, this here. And then we've got the 4. We can either see this as the 4 here, or we can just count the number 1, 2, 3 for the supporting struts. So we've got the tetractys, haven't we? So we've got the 1 number at the top, the 2 underneath that, the 3 after that, and the 4 here. So we've got a lot of number symbolism here. And we've also obviously got the reference to the 6, which is the tarot card of the lovers, which is about making choices and making decisions. But these choices and decisions are at the throes of the fate. I haven't yet decided what I think that this missing part of the pillar kind of means. Whether that is a hint at not being a full picture, or whether that this wheel is not really supported by a material structure, that there's nothing really that's supporting it, and it gives it the illusion of being fate, but actually we do have a control over it because nothing is supporting it on the material ring. So I've not quite worked out what I think that this means, but you can definitely consider your own interpretation on the missing frame here. The ground here is a rocky plain blue. It is very barren. This is quite unique for Tarot de Marseille, because normally you'll see like a little kind of shrubby plant like this on one of the sides, and we don't have anything here. It's very barren. It kind of makes me think that we are almost in the world of the gods, where we're not on this physical plane, we're not in a Garden of Eden, but instead we are in one that is barren and plain. We could be in heaven, for example, and this kind of reference to this blue colour being on the ground kind of makes me think that we could be in the heavens, having the wheel of fate turned by the deities. So after all that, what does this card mean? Well, it means an awful lot in a lot of different decisions. Upright, it can mean about destiny, luck, and fates. So if we are looking at it, like I said, in a relationship situation, and relationship is going well, it is saying that it is pretty much destined to be. It's good. There is good fortune there, and this is something that is ready to move on to its next cycle. If it is about a job interview that's ongoing, it can say you may get it, you may not, but whatever happens is the right thing. We're not saying, it's generally seen as a bit of a good luck symbol that there is going to be a positive resolution to the outcome. But when something is so you don't know whether it's good or bad, it will normally mean something like whatever happens, it's fated to be. The other thing that it can talk about is changing of cycles. So it can talk about the need to make a change, especially with cyclic behavior, so habits or things that just keep happen, and patterns of behavior. So let's talk about smoking or alcoholism, or even just destructive behaviors, So like, you know, I get wound up, I get very angry, or I get upset and I run off crying and I flee the scene. Those kind of habits that are we've kind of learned over time as a kind of self-preservation strategy, but we do it in every single situation, no matter whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It can be talking about that kind of wheel, that wheel of fate that we just need to step off. So it can talk about the need to make changes, the need to stop the wheel, get off, reassess what we're doing, and then start the new wheel. So always remember with the Wheel of Fate that we have completed one cycle. That might not be the best completion ever, and we're now at a point where we can decide what happens on the next cycle. So there is a hint of pause there. And I know we say this about some other cards, but there is this hint of each of the cards is like this pause between it and the next cycle, it and the next card. And this one's even more so because we have completed that first turn. So there is an ability here to decide what changes that you want to make and instigate those changes. We're not completely fated. We are not completely at the whims of fate. We do have our own free will, whereas, you know, it's the John Locke problem, the soft determinism. We may be locked in a room, but we still have the ability to go and check whether the door is locked or not, or just lay on the bed. You know, we've got some free will, we've got some ability to express ourselves, even when we consider the situation quite fate derived. The other thing that it can be is about habits, which is kind of what I hinted at, the things that are just continually turning on a circle and need to be broken. So this card can come up to talk about addictions or behavioral cycles that just aren't breaking. Things happening at the right time is another thing that can be talking about. Like, if something is happening and we're all talking about something that's just starting to happen, it's saying that things are just happening at the right time. If we are asking about when something will be, and this comes up, it normally is an indication for me of it'll happen when it happens. It's almost like the blank card, the joker of the deck, in terms of timing, because it really is a kind of a it'll happen when it happens. Yes, it's been given a timing in kind of astrological tarot, but actually when I kind of interpret it, I normally interpret it along the lines of relax, it'll happen. The other thing that it can be, especially if it's reversed or in a position where it's not necessarily positive, it can be talking about delays. So this cycle is delayed for some reason. So if it comes up as a job interview, it could be about, if it's in the right capacity, it could be like it's going to be timely. But if it's in a negative capacity, either situated with negative cards if you don't do reversals, or reversals if you do reversals, it can be about delays or issues about delays, or issues coming up that may delay things. Cool. That was a really badly worded, so I apologise for that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Obviously you'll be able to kind of extrapolate some of the points that I do into other meanings and other areas of context, but I think that gives you a good indication of what this card means and how to interpret it. So I hope that's been helpful for everyone, and I hope that you've managed to kind of get some gold nuggets out of that little session. If you have any questions, please put your comments below. I do read them and I do respond to them, honest, so please put your comments below, even if it is just a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It does help me out immensely. And for those of you that do support me on Patreon, thank you so much. You make these videos happen. There will be a handout, a cheat sheet that is normally about 10 pages that covers everything I talk about in this video and more on Patreon for those people that support me. If you do not currently support me, please consider doing so. It keeps these going and it does give you an awful lot more free stuff. So for the price of a digital cup of coffee, you get these 10-page per card handouts, which are great and will be turned into kind of a free ebook for my Patreon subscribers. So that is everything. I hope that's been really helpful. I hope to see you next time on card 11, where we could be doing one of two cards. So take care, and I look forward to seeing you later. Take care, bye.